Hi, everyone. This is Danny Haiphong. Good evening. Good evening. I'm going to let it kind of run for a little bit because I know that YouTube can be slow. So, good evening. Good Saturday evening. I should have a good hour or a little bit more, an hour and a half. Hello. Hello, Death Leopards. How are you? How are you? So, I'm going to let this run a bit just to see what's going on. But good evening, good Saturday evening. Okay, I think I'm now live on YouTube, and I'm sure everywhere else is up to date as well. So I am here this evening to talk about a few things. Hello, negation of the negation of the negation. That's sounds like I hear Huey Newton when I hear negation of the negation of the negation. So hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good Saturday evening. I am here to address a few things. And I don't usually come on at this time. Generally, I'm trying to decompress during my weekends, but it's been a little bit harder. I don't know if you could tell. I've been writing a lot, and I have had a little bit less time to do the streams. So, hello. Okay, hello, John Doe. Yeah, I was on Richard Medhurst's show. Actually, he will be releasing interview at some point that we did, not only on this topic, but on all things China and the Winter Olympics, which I'm sure will come up. So, I am actually just turning this post on public for Facebook. I always forget to do that. So, good evening. Good Saturday evening. Thank you for coming. I'm going to address a few things today. How do I sound, by the way? I downloaded this new audio app thing, this new kind of sound and audio system that is helping make it easier to adjust my audio and everything. So, how do I sound? How's my mic volume? All right. All right. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Dylan. Hello. Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. All right. So good evening. I'm just gonna keep running a little bit. I'll get started in about 3 or to 5 minutes, but on the topics at hand. But I've had a little bit less time. I've been writing a lot. I don't know if you've seen my articles on Substack. I've probably published 3 to 5 articles in the last couple of weeks or something like that. It's been sometimes it's a little bit of a stream of consciousness thing. Sometimes it's just everything is happening at the same time, and I just go for it. So there you go. If you go to my Substack, you can subscribe there for free. You can find my article on 8 times that the United States used biological and chemical warfare since World War II alone. And I wasn't able to get to all of the examples because that would be a whole book. But it is around 2,500 words, one of my longer articles, given that the United States has done that so much. And then there's also an article on Eileen Gu and what I term racial loyalty and how the backlash against her by the new Cold War apparatus led by the United States is reflective of this continued legacy of racial loyalty that the empire really does demand out of all of us, but especially those who are targeted by racism. So there's that. And then I'm also about to publish another article on Dave Zirin's recent take on the Olympics. Thank you to the subscriber on Patreon and Facebook friend who put me on to him and Jules Boykins' recent article in The Nation, which maybe I'll share with you toward the end of this stream regarding their take on the Winter Olympics and the backlash against it. It's typical kind of American leftist concessions to the empire when it comes to China, which I deem a new term for me, the China exception, meaning that your social justice leanings, your anti-war leanings tend to go out the window when we talk about China and when the vast majority of the left talks about China. So that article is actually forthcoming. So William said, "Do I work for Bar anymore?" I do still contribute to Black Agenda Report. Yes, I've actually just been using my Substack because I've been just writing articles, stream of conscious. I'm still publishing for Black Agenda Report. I'm still doing my best to help them. There's been a bit of a difficult time securing guests recently. I don't know if that's the holidays or whatever, but it's been difficult to secure guests just all across the board. And I've kind of had to jump on it when possible. So yeah, I mean, I'm running this on my own for the most part with some assistance on the side, but Yeah, I'm still writing for them, and I've still had a few original articles. I've just been taking it a little slower. I've been trying to do my own work as well, trying to hone my craft through the Substack. I feel like that's helped a lot. It's helped me kind of work at my own pace, and I'm doing a little things a little bit differently. But no, I'm still definitely with Black Agenda Report. So thank you so much. So let me just first say that also this winter season has obviously been difficult for a lot of people economically. I can totally tell by the fact that on Patreon, especially, people are leaving and people are saying that they don't have the means. So that's just an unfortunate outcome of this capitalist crisis, the inflation, so-called inflation crisis, which really just is the capitalist crisis prolonged. It really just is a byproduct of just pumping money into the banks that the Federal Reserve and that the United States government is just doing as a whole. And this just complete and utter super exploitation that the United States is imposing upon working people has its consequences for people like us. So, if you are able to subscribe to my Patreon for whatever amount per month, that's how I kind of support the show. So, if you notice, some people do notice I don't do super chats. Patreon is really the way where you can support the show. You will get more than one of these per month, and that's how you can kind of give like a super chat, so to speak, if you want to look at it that way, because there will be more, usually more than one of these per month, but at least one of these per month. So please do subscribe if you can. Patreon.com/Haiphong. It's in the description. You can also subscribe annually on Substack, where I do also post everything, including video streams and everything that I am up to. But nonetheless, I see people coming in. Welcome, welcome. Good evening, good evening. If you're on Facebook, please go to the YouTube and like this stream. Please go to the YouTube and like this stream. If you are on Facebook, if you see this on Twitter, go to YouTube, like this stream, help boost that algorithm, because things are difficult here in the realm of social media and these platforms that we're trying to use, given the heightened level of censorship that we're all facing. So thank you so much for those who are supporting in any way that they can. So yeah, good evening, good evening. I will first begin by saying that this is not the newest story, but you probably are familiar with it. Uh, Mediares, yes, you can do one time on Venmo, and I can send that Venmo to you all actually here. Hold on one second. I am at, if you all prefer that, that is great. But please, Venmo is, definitely understand the one time donation. But if you do want to support like through the super chat system, if you do want to just support the work generally, Patreon is the best way to go. So, okay, let's get started. So, this isn't the newest story, but I definitely want to try to keep this concise. I did have an interesting criticism from a supporter actually about the fact that, it can seem that I'm unprepared a little bit for these streams. Sometimes that is true. I like to go spontaneous on streams just because I feel like I am able to really tap it and harness my ideological and political analysis a little bit more that way. Plus, I don't always have the time to be super prepared for these streams because I also do writing on the side. I do still work part time a bit as well. So I don't have all of the time in the world to prepare 100% like you see maybe more professional streamers doing it, but I hope I do not disappoint. Anyway, so this story, Susan Sarandon, right? So, all right, first things first. I totally defend Susan Sarandon through all of the attacks that she has received, right? Susan Sarandon has been attacked by establishment liberals, by the neoliberal ruling class, by the DNC over and over and over again, right? She's an asset of Russia. She is someone who is kind of like a disruptor. She's been called all the names in the book by the DNC because she refuses to toe the establishment party line. She criticizes corporate Democrats. She is someone who a lot of people look up to, rightfully so. I totally respect Susan Sarandon's political positions over the course of the last several years, especially since Bernie Sanders' 2016 run, because she is willing to stand up to corporate Democrats. She does it through social media and her public statements. She has shown up as an activist to very important union struggles, and I respect that. So this has nothing to do with her prior work, this criticism that is about to come, because I do understand how important it is to defend Susan Sarandon from the attacks of the neoliberal ruling class. However, that doesn't mean that mistakes aren't made and that these mistakes have significant consequences when it comes to the movement at large, when it comes to left politics at large. What I'm referring to here is Susan Sarandon's apology after she used one of my tweets, which I was very happy that she did at first. And I didn't even know until, unfortunately, there was the back and forth that led to the apology. But I didn't even know this. She used one of my tweets in some sort of Instagram story, I believe it was, where she made comments that the NYPD, the Police Benevolent Association nationally, basically all the entire police union apparatus from the local level to the federal level, so national level, I should say, not the federal level, although they do have huge influence over federal policy. They came out and attacked Susan Sarandon hard, right? Because through my Twitter post that she reshared, they jumped on it to say she was insinuating that the NYPD is what fascism looks like. It's not wrong, and a lot of people said she's not wrong, but really they were saying I'm not wrong because I was the one who tweeted it out. So let me show you exactly what the post looked like. I'm going to share my screen real quick and just show you what this tweet looked like. All right, because or what this post looked like. So here we go. All right. So there it is. I hope that's big enough. I can't tell. My screen's pretty small right now. Can you all see that post? I know it's in that format that may make it a little hard. Anyway, so this is what it looked like, right? So she said, right, and this was about the NYPD funeral. And my original tweet, which you can't probably, I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but my original tweet was, I'm gonna tell my kids one day this is what fascism looks like, right? And it was this NYPD funeral, which was massive, right? Just look at how many police officers are there, right? Just look at how many police officers, cops, pigs are filled in the streets. They're filling the streets. All right, so people are saying it's too tiny. Sorry about that. I don't really know how to make this bigger. So sorry about that. It was the only one I could find. I feel like because of the apology, there has been I'm just gonna stop sharing it. How about that? So, all right, it doesn't matter. So I tweeted, "This is what fascism looks like. I'm going to tell my kids this is what fascism looks like." She shared it and she said, "So if all these cops weren't needed for crime that day, that doesn't that mean that they aren't needed any day?" And then there was supposedly a hashtag. I don't see a hashtag, but the corporate media all over the place claimed that there was a hashtag that said hashtag abolish the police, which was the controversy, right? The first the fascism reference and then abolish the police. Now, Susan Sarandon isn't wrong, and I certainly don't believe I'm wrong, but the problem here, and I'm going to share the article. I hope that the article is not too small. Please let me know because I gave a statement to Business Insider about this. And I want to just go over this article because I think it's a good summary of what happened from the lens of the corporate media. So please tell me if this is too small. Okay. How's that look, guys? Oh, there's that damn ad. I hate ads. Okay. Can you see the article that I just posted? Susan Sarandon apologized for reposting a tweet that appeared to imply a crowd of police officers gathered for funeral looked like fascism. All right. So if you can see that, I'll go over the article in a bit, but I'm just going to say Now, none of us are wrong, of course, but the police unions asserted their pressure, and so did the corporate media by repeating this story over and over and over again, right? So, wow, Business Insider is super obnoxious with these ads that you cannot get rid of. So, yeah, weren't incorrect, but the pressure got to Susan Sarandon. And I understand the pressure is tough. I bet I under the apology seemed like it was attorney laden. It was formulated almost focus group through her attorneys or attorney. I don't know how many she has, but someone like her, I assume that she has more than one attorney. And I understand this is what the NYPD, this is what the police do. So the NYPD has this funeral for a police officer who was killed answering a domestic violence call, I believe it was. And the NYPD used it as a propaganda opportunity to show, oh, look how dangerous our job is. Not true. The NYPD, the police departments as a whole in the United States, it's not a very dangerous job. That's just a fact. It's not the most dangerous job in the United States. I don't even think it ranks in the top six most dangerous jobs in the United States. And they used this opportunity. They exploited the death of their own, right? Blue Brotherhood, quote unquote. They used the death of their own as an opportunity to try to promote this narrative that look how dangerous things are. And this has been the case in New York City and cities all across the country for many, 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 many months now, if not since the 2020 uprisings, Black Lives Matter uprisings. There's been this war on crime narrative continuing to escalate and bubble up, bubble up, bubble up. And the cops are using this as an opportunity to get more funding, to install political officials like Eric Adams, the new mayor of NYC, as their conduits to ensure that they receive the funding that they want, right? There's no defunding of the police, all of that. They don't want any of that. And this is part of it, this huge mass funeral. It was a political statement, a political statement if there ever was one. I mean, they were blocking emergency vehicles, maskless, in the middle of downtown New York City, side to side, like a paramilitary fascistic organization demonstrating their political power for all to see. I don't know if you'll remember when de Blasio was in office early in his administration, the NYPD turned their backs on him during one of his early speeches because they believed that he wasn't loyal enough to them. This was very similar in the sense that they were demonstrating their political power to the public, but this time they have someone who's even more friendly to them because de Blasio certainly was no opponent of the NYPD, but Eric Adams is their BFF. Eric Adams is their best friend. Eric Adams is one of them. He is guaranteeing that not only will the NYPD be fully funded, but the NYPD will be fully protected politically, and that includes in the realm of public relations. So it's a very dangerous time here in New York City because the NYPD has gone through a lot of opposition, starting with the stop and frisk protests and the movement that led to the elimination of that. And now, with this Black Lives Matter uprising and all of that, they are feeling like they are under a quote unquote attack, which isn't true in reality. But their popularity, their legitimacy has waned to such a high degree. And now they have their person in there, Eric Adams, to help them out. And this was part of this. It was a disgusting act. Blocking emergency vehicles, blocking traffic in downtown Manhattan at that time. I mean, how damaging is that for working class people, for poor people who need to get to healthcare, who need to get to their jobs? It was a scene. So let's talk about this article. Let me go through it, okay? So here's Susan Sarandon. I'm sorry about the ad. I don't know how to get rid of that. Let me see if there's a way. It just won't let me get rid of it. So, oh well. So anyway, Susan Sarandon was criticized for a tweet on February 1st questioning police levels in New York City. She reshared that tweet. She reshared a tweet that compared a funeral procession for a deceased NYPD officer to fascism. That's me. That's my tweet. Susan Sarandon apologized to the families of two dead NYPD officers. Oh, it was two. I thought it was just one, but it was two. After sharing an image on Twitter that compared a funeral procession to a deceased NYPD officer, Jason Rivera, to fascism. The tweet from Sarandon, which was posted on February 1st and has since been deleted, featured a screenshot of a January 29th tweet from independent journalist Danny Haiphong, which contained an image of a police procession in New York City, including a parade of police officers, cars, motorbikes lit in red and blue. The caption on Haiphong's original tweet, which was still up at the time, reads, "I'm going to tell my kids this is what fascism looks like." So I'm sharing this article first off also because this journalist, this I actually have respect for her. She actually DM'd me and asked me for a statement and published it in full exactly how I wrote it. And she was willing to, unlike The Hill, unlike CNN, unlike all of these other hack corporate media, so-called journalists, she actually quoted the tweet correctly. Most of these will not do that. They are so scared of the police that they will not even quote the tweet directly. They will only quote and misquote, I think, what Susan Sarandon said. So I got to give props to this journalist because they actually used my statement. And I was very clear with them. I don't want my statement to be used in any way. I don't want to cut up. If I write a statement, you have to publish it in full. And she agreed. And that was great. So keep going. Sarandon, who has tweeted before about being in favor of defunding the police, reposted my tweet along with an image overlay caption that reads, "So if these cops weren't needed for crime that day, doesn't that mean they aren't needed any day?" It also included a hashtag that read abolish the police. It's unclear if Sarandon herself added both the hashtag and additional text overlaying Haiphong's tweet. The image in the tweet appears to be a screenshot of an Instagram story, although it's also unclear if it was originally posted on Susan Sarandon's Instagram account. Yeah, all of this is unclear. And then she on Friday posted an apology on her Twitter, and here's what it says: "I deeply regret the meme I recently shared on Twitter that included a photo of Officer Rivera's funeral. I reacted quickly to the picture without connecting it to a police funeral, and I realize now how insensitive and deeply disrespectful it was to make that point at that time. I sincerely apologize to the family of Officers Rivera and Mora for causing additional pain during their time of grieving." So I'm just going to stop sharing this because we don't need to hear the yada, yada, yada from the corporate media. He said, she said, they said, all that. I want now just to address the apology and what that really means. So that sounded like it was straight from the Police Benevolent Association's mouth, right? That apology. It didn't sound super genuine. It sounded like it was focus group through attorneys legally. She was obviously threatened. And that's what I asked on Twitter. I said, "Were you threatened by the PBA because of this?" Because that's what they do. I mean, in the Philadelphia Police Department and the Pennsylvania State Police, over Mumia Abu Jamal, they literally threaten judges. They threaten, uh, defense attorneys. They actually threaten their careers over Mumia Abu Jamal's continuing imprisonment. I mean, this is just well documented. And so it seems to me that she was threatened, but she has not come out and said that, of course, because probably she fears legal ramifications. Okay, I get it. But, there are times where you do have to stand up for your principles. And I think that for those of us who have been involved in struggles to free political prisoners like Mumia Abu Jamal, who have been on the front lines of anti-police brutality protests, for those in the movement, for those who believe in these principles, who happen not to be celebrities, who have wealth and status and some modicum of power, it really does sting a bit because she made a choice. You make a choice when you share something from someone like me. I'm not a celebrity. I'm an activist. I'm a journalist. I'm a revolutionary. At least I believe myself to be one. I'm someone who always stands firm to my principles. And because of what she did, I actually received some of the nastiest DMs that I've ever received on social media because she obviously widened the platform from which my work was exposed, right? She widened the access, and more of these thin blue line, blue brotherhood, propaganda, right-wing nuts, they all came into my DMs, flooded it. I mean, the most racist, transphobic, nasty things you can think of, threats, people, "I'm coming to find you." I mean, this is in part because of Susan Sarandon. Most people who follow me, this is just how it is now. Most people who follow me at least agree with me somewhat, and those who follow me, who don't agree with me, they also happen not to be right-wing nuts or people who, even if they're trolls, they're not here to engage in that kind of vitriol and that kind of harassment, right? So, and I won't speak for everybody because I definitely get that in my Twitter replies, but I just don't see it as much. So, I mean, my position on this is that Susan Sarandon should really just stick to what she believes in, right? She should publicize any threats. This is an opportunity, and this is the problem with those in the Bernie Sanders wing of this movement, right? There's just still too much, and she may claim that she's third party, but I know, she supported the Bernie Sanders wing of the movement before that, and she kind of comes out of that social democratic trend that's happening in the United States. And let's be honest, there's still this attachment to status that creates scenarios like this where it is really a betrayal of the movement. Like, I feel betrayed. And look, Susan Sarandon doesn't owe me anything, but she owes the movement something. She owes the movement that she claims to be a part of the courage and the conviction to stick by what she believes in, so that those who actually are attacked, those activists, the Black Lives Matters activists like Darren Seal, for example, Ferguson, like these Ferguson activists everywhere who have been disappeared, who have been arrested, who have mysteriously died, right? That folks like that have some modicum of support from people who actually do have the power, the access, the status to provide some protection to some degree, right? During the 1960s and 70s, the Black Panther Party was actually very effective in organizing support from the celebrity class, from people like Marlon Brando, Jane Fonda, people like that, to not only throw a little bit of money, although I don't think it was a lot of money, but a little bit of money to the organizing efforts, the survival programs, but also it's about public relations. It's about having people on your team who are able to help you stem the tide. There's stories during the 41st in Central shootout that happened in 1969 in Los Angeles, right, of SDS members, white SDS members, those of middle class background, actually sacrificing their bodies and saying, no, we're going to protect the Black Panther Party headquarters. And this was done all across the country, from police raids, from FBI raids. I mean, it's powerful actions like that that demonstrate real courage. But when you apologize in this way, it is really such a deep concession that it brings things politically backward, right? It brings developments backward, even if it's not to a high degree, it is to a degree that is significant, and it must be commented on. So I am very disappointed that she apologized. It would have been better if she had just let the moment pass. But something was obviously happening in the background that we are not aware of, because given this response, it's obviously legal in character, right? I'm sure she had all of the police unions ready to litigate, and they probably threatened to put her in the poorhouse, which the police can do that, right? She doesn't have that much power, right? So I just wanted to comment on that really quickly, because no one really asked me. A lot of people have been covering this, and bless Richard Medhurst. He's an amazing comrade. He actually had me on, and that interview will be coming up at some point, hopefully in the next few days, I think. He actually had me on to talk about this because nobody asked me about it. Everyone was commenting on it, right? And nobody wanted to ask me. I was the subject of the tweet. So why don't you just ask? Why don't you just ask me? Just let's talk about it, because this is a moment, right, that reflects not only the overwhelming political power of police departments in the United States, which is an indicator of fascism. It is, right? The US is a society with fascist characteristics. It is literally an imperialist society with fascist characteristics. We should call it imperialism with fascist characteristics, the United States. This is one of them, right? The NYPD being able to do this, the police unions being able to do this, that is just a demonstration of how much influence they have. And let's not even get into, I mean, we can get into just how they keep political prisoners behind the walls. Leonard Peltier, who has COVID-19 right now, is unable to get released. And it's mostly because of both the FBI and the police unions who want to see Leonard Peltier dead. The same goes for Mumia Abu-Jamal. The same goes for the New Jersey police state system with Sundiata Kohli, right? All of these political prisoners who former Black Liberation Army, former Black Panther Party members, former Black revolutionaries, or continue to be Black revolutionaries, they are all being lynched inside of prisons permanently because of the police unions for the most part. And Drew bin Wahad, he has an incredible analysis on this because he experienced it firsthand being in prison for more than 15 years. He experienced it firsthand, especially, I mean, he was a New York Panther BLA, and he experienced what the New York police system, in conjunction with their their political influence over the entire state, what that was able to do to him, right? So yeah, that's what this demonstrates. And the police right now are pearl clutching. They are worried, right, that their legitimacy with the public has waned so much that the popularity across large sections of the United States, not just with Black people who never had much to think about the police, given that, right, police lynchings, terrorism, violence did not begin in 2014 when Michael Brown was killed, right? It had been happening for decades and decades. It was the basis for the Watts Rebellion. It was the basis for the rebellions in Harlem, Detroit, all throughout the 60s, the basis for rebellions even earlier than that across the United States. And the origins of the police are deeply related and connected to chattel slavery. So, right, the police are worried now because large sections of white people, especially white workers, young white people across really the class spectrum. I mean, let's not talk about the bourgeoisie, but those who maybe are college students, who are workers. Most people are workers these days in the United States. A lot of white people don't like the police right now and are not willing to defend them. And so that means that there is a broad consensus in the United States that the police need to be reformed. Look at what Biden has done. Biden has had to respond rhetorically, but look at how he responded. He said, "Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah, we need police reform, but that means we need to fund police more," right? He's totally in with the cops. Surprise, surprise. He was the architect of many crime bills, not just 94, but he helped write 86 as well, the Anti Drug Abuse Act, all the way into the 94 crime bill. So Joe Biden is totally in league with the police and with the mass incarceration state. But even he had to talk about police reform during his campaign because a lot of Democrats just wouldn't vote for him then. Especially a lot of these Bernie Democrats who don't want to vote for Republican, don't see themselves voting third party, unfortunately. That's one of the limitations, I guess. So he had to pander to it, but he pandered to it in the most reactionary way. Hey, I'm going to fund police so they can become better, right? We're going to get rid of those bad apples. And that's where we are right now, right? The police are looking, right? And people like Eric Adams, Joe Biden, right? They don't provide the most fertile ground, but Eric Adams is, and local officials across the country, and then we'll see what happens in 2024. But it's likely that we will see the police looking for more and more space to crack down, to start cracking heads. I mean, that's they're just they're relishing for that moment, right? Because 2020 was such, I think, a visceral moment for the police in the United States. They did feel like they were under attack, and they want revenge. And so we have to remember that this is what this is about with Susan Sarandon. The police want revenge on the masses. They want revenge on the movement. They want to crack heads. And that is what they are looking to accomplish through politics, right? And they're trying to open up more and more political space. That's why, I mean, a lot of the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff had to do with that as well. The way that the narrative was being swung around and around and around, right? The cops were playing a big role. I mean, that's why he's going to the conservative conferences and all of that, because the cops are trying to swing this narrative about the rebellion of 2020 as it being violent, as it being something that deserves to be repressed should it happen again. And they're waiting. The cops are waiting. So this Susan Sarandon situation, it's an unfortunate one. I just want to say I'm disappointed, Susan Sarandon. I really am, because if you're going to use a tweet from someone like me, who mostly People like Susan Sarandon ignore. I'm too revolutionary. I'm too socialist. I'm too communist. I don't know. Can't touch this guy's work, right? I'm too pro China. I'm too pro DPRK, whatever, right? That's usually, I know. Come on. This stuff may not be said publicly, but we know what goes on in people's heads. We know what goes on in people's heads with people who are less in the celebrity sphere and more politically aligned with us. We know that this goes on in the heads of a lot of leftists. And so if you're going to share something of mine, if you're going to share something, especially if you're going to share something that's so important to the movement, these kind of statements, right? That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to make a statement. Connecting police to fascism, get people thinking. Why would I say that? What about the police would make someone like me say that, right? I'm trying to get people thinking here. Her apology is the opposite of that. Her apology says, oh, no, 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 I was wrong. And now she's telling millions of people that she's wrong, that there are moments where the police deserve our empathy and our sympathy. She, through her apology, reinforces this notion that cops are just people too, rather than an apparatus of the state. That no matter who you are inside of that, the purpose, the role, the interests behind the police are in the lead, they're in the vanguard. You cannot individualize that. We're not here to organize cops, right? We're here to build a strong enough movement from which, if there are cops who don't want to be part of the slave catcher apparatus, the police state apparatus, good on them. We'll welcome them with open arms. But we're not here to organize cops. We're not here to say the police are workers too, right? We can't do that. How can we do that when they're killing working class people? They're killing black people. They're killing working class people, 1,000 per year. We can't do that. They're funneling people into a 2 million plus prison apparatus. If they're not killing you, they're terrorizing you. And if they're not terrorizing you, they're intimidating you. And if they're not intimidating you, they are there to do all three should you get out of line. That's the reality of policing in the United States. That is what it's all about. It's about protecting and serving capital, protecting and serving the elite. Susan Sarandon knows this, but she apologized for it anyway. And so that's my message to you, Susan. That's my message to all of you who have been following this. You got to stand by your convictions. You got to have the courage. You got to publicize those threats. Sometimes you got to take risks. And I get it. The movement isn't in the place where maybe that seems available. But then I think the original decision of sharing it should not have been done, right? When you're a revolutionary, your actions, everything that you do, everything that you say has consequences, and you know that. You know that history is constantly moving. You are a dialectical materialist. You understand that everything is changing and that contradictions are constantly struggling with each other and are constantly in motion because of that struggle, and that eventually those contradictions will transform in some way. So, with that said, you know that your actions do matter. Regardless of whether you think that they're not making an impact, what you say and what you do does matter. And Susan Sarandon seemed to forget that based on probably what was a real nasty, legal oriented attack on her. I'm sure they're threatening to sue her. I'm sure they're threatening to use the deaths of these cops as defamation, something like that. And they wanted to bleed her. And I'm sure she was worried about that. And that's just the objective reality of the situation, guys. So that's my comments on that. So, all right, we're moving on from Susan Sarandon. I see a lot of people have come in. Welcome. Good evening. Good Saturday evening. I'll be on here for another 30, 40 minutes, probably. So, with that said, please like this stream. Like, help boost it in the algorithm. If you're on Facebook, if you're on any other social media, go to the YouTube channel and like the stream. And if you can, unfortunately, I'm trying to actually work up to a goal of 400 Patreon subscribers, and I've had a lot of back and forth, and I'm very close, but it is difficult because of the economic situation. So if you are able to support the show, please do at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. You're not only supporting the show, you're supporting all of my articles, you're supporting all of my activity. You're really supporting me as I contribute to the movement in the way that I can right now. So please do that. It kind of substitutes for the super chat. I do one of these at least once per month, more than that. But I'm on here more than that, right? So you can support this sort of thing through that. I don't do the ads or monetization of this channel. Uh, I don't I don't do that. So patreon.com/Danny Haiphong is the best way. If you are unable to do that, there are one-time options. I should have included them in the description. I don't think I did, but I will put them here in the chat if you do want me to. But at the end, I think what I'll do is I'll put them in the description. So once the stream ends, if you want to make a one-time donation, you can. But patreon.com/Danny Haiphong is the best way to support me. But I'm going to move on now to the story that is blowing up again. And I'm sick of this story because it really just is another example of the United States escalating the new Cold War with Russia this time. I usually talk about China, but with Russia and literally making things up out of whole cloth. It's just pathetic. So the United States now, Joe Biden administration, is once again claiming that Russia is imminently going to invade Ukraine. Weeks ago, right? I think it was a little over a week ago, we had President Zelensky of Ukraine, of the president of the puppet government of Ukraine, that is the product of a 2014 coup by the United States. For what it's worth, FYI, he has already said that the United States is the one that is propagandizing about war. He didn't put it in those terms, but he said that the United States is hyping war and that there is no invasion that is going to happen imminently. So we really do need to cool the jets. That's essentially what he said. Now, the United States media, the corporate media, and Joe Biden, the State Department, they don't even mention the Ukrainian president's name. He's kind of persona non grata because he is not going along with what really is, I think, a byproduct of so many problems that the United States is facing that we will get into. But I want to just share one story. I'm just going to share one corporate media report on this from today about the recent escalations over Ukraine. So let me do that. It's a CNN report where Biden says, I think you can see that now. Right. So Biden warns, man, there are just ads everywhere, huh? This is wild. It's awful. Um, so Biden warns Putin will react decisively and impose swift and severe costs if Russia invades Ukraine. So that is from today. So President Joe Biden warned Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, that the U.S. and its allies will respond decisively and impose swift and severe consequences on Russia should Putin decide to invade Ukraine. So they talked today. Putin and Biden spoke today. The White House said Biden made clear in this call that to Putin what he would be risking with an invasion. A senior administration official told reporters following the call that the discussion was substantive, but the U.S. fears Russia may still launch an attack anyway. Think about that. Russia has not invaded Ukraine once since the 2014 coup. Russia has supported the Donbass region in its struggle. It has reinstated or instated, I should say, Crimea, right after the 2014 referendum, right after the coup, where 90+% of people of Crimea said they want to be part of Russian Federation because they're Russian speaking and they didn't want to be lynched by far right fascist mobs, which is what a lot of the Ukrainian government was at that time and still is. That's what Russia has done, surely, right? So we have to put that into context and say, yeah, Russia has been involved in Ukraine. It just happens to be on Russia's border. It just happened. It used to be a much closer ally under Yanukovych before the coup. And there's still bilateral relations between Ukraine and Russia. But the United States has used Ukraine as one of the most important ships in this new Cold War, right? To install a far right government hostile to Russia right on the border, to empower far right groups that are extremely hostile to Russians, right? To Russian speaking people. That is very concerning. and then to threaten NATO membership, to say that NATO membership is being pursued. And now Joe Biden and his administration will always say, no, 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 it's not. We're not pursuing NATO membership, but Ukraine is free to decide, right? Well, actually, we know how close the Biden family is to this Ukraine coup. We know about the Hunter Biden situation. We know that Hunter Biden had a prominent board position where he was getting paid $50,000. What was that, per month or something? And that was a byproduct of the coup, right? The Obama administration produced that situation, and they started all of this through the coup and continued to bully Ukraine through the IMF, through military operations and so-called cooperation, to be hostile and to dangle NATO membership in front of these puppet forces to say you can truly be one of us by joining NATO, and that's a huge threat to Russia. If Ukraine were to join NATO, what would happen, right? Ukraine would get even more military aid, even more weapons of mass destruction amassed on the Russian border. That's already happening. We know that $2.7 billion has been funneled to Ukraine in the last year alone in military aid. That is significant, and we can't forget that. So President Biden was clear that if Russia undertakes further invasion, right, further invasion of Ukraine, interesting language, the United States, together with our allies and partners, will respond decisively and impose swift and severe costs on Russia. President Biden reiterated that a further Russian invasion of Ukraine, further again, boom, 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 further, right? The Russia has already invaded Ukraine, is the insinuation here. It would produce widespread human suffering and diminish Russia's standing, the White House said in a statement, adding Biden was, quote, clear with Putin that while the United States remains prepared to engage in diplomacy in full coordination with our allies and partners, we are already prepared for other scenarios. There you have it, folks. The United States is prepared for war. That's what it's saying. And now let's be honest, the United States is not prepared for war. The United States can't. If the United States were to go to war with Russia and start a global conflagration of this magnitude, the United States' capitalist economy, which is literally threadbare, literally, I mean, just literally on the verge of collapse via the most minor shifts in economic, political health and stability. To think that a global confrontation with Russia, which is what a war with Russia would be, it would pull in China, it would pull in Iran, it would pull in all of Europe, right? 40% of natural gas, of which is provided by Russia. It would create extreme pressures on a country like Germany with the Nord Stream pipeline. I mean, all of these huge pressures that would be placed on the whole world based on a confrontation with Russia led by the United States would be disastrous, right? So, wow, these ads. So, this is absolutely just damning. This just shows through the language further Russian invasion, further. I'm sure what they're referring to is that Russia has been amassing troops, meaning that within Russia, they have been preparing for what what Russia thinks would be some kind of first move, some kind of proxy attack on the border, which would require Russia to respond, right? Really, what Russia's doing is preparing to defend itself. But that's not how it is framed. Russia has already sent Vladimir Putin, the Russian Federation has sent both to Ukraine and the United States and to NATO, I believe, its demands, which is just please stop pressuring NATO membership, stop thinking about it, stop it. Stop the NATO membership threat, stop the military escalations. We'll all stop and we will all then negotiate diplomatically under conditions where diplomacy is possible. Because right now, this kind of language, diplomacy is not possible. We have to be honest about that. The diplomacy is not possible when you are literally saying that you are prepared for war and literally sending military weaponry to Ukraine and literally claiming that Russia has already invaded Ukraine. You've actually painted the entire scenario for a US led war. Through all of that, you've actually painted a picture where the US has a basis to wage war now on Russia, in saying that somehow you are ready for diplomacy. This is how the United States does things. It's completely and utterly reactionary. It is utterly imperialist, and it is so utterly dangerous. But this is the state of the United States, this imperialist system right now. This is the state of the war machine. This is what the military contractors want. This is what the donor class wants. This is what Wall Street wants. They want more markets. They want to open up the military industrial complex to more markets. And so that means you have to have national security, quote unquote, threats. And that's what they're trying to generate through NATO, which is ironic because NATO actually is not a national security, quote unquote, threat to the United States. It's an alliance that has actually well outlasted its usefulness, given that it was organized to counter the Soviet Union. One comment on that, because people say this, oh, NATO should have disbanded because they promised Gorbachev, the United States promised Gorbachev not to expand eastward further if the Soviet Union would meet their demands and if they would liberalize, et cetera, et cetera. And oh, the Soviet Union fell. And so that's just shows that NATO has no longer has a purpose. That's always so naive to think that an institution like NATO follows any kind of international law or legalities or diplomacy, some kind of agreements. No, NATO was formulated in response to the Soviet Union in the specific sense, in the concrete sense. But in the broad sense, NATO was a response to the socialist movement, to the world socialist movement. It was about uniting capitalist countries militarily under the leadership of the United States, which had become the imperialist power, which had become the foremost imperialist power. It was really a way for the United States to express its newfound economic supremacy through military means and attempt to contain the world socialist movement, which was burgeoning at that time. You had the Soviet Union, you had China, you had Korea, you had Cuba, you had so many countries that were on fire, that were struggling for socialism, and NATO was one way to keep the European side, the Eurasian side of the continent in check. And that's what NATO is all about. And NATO actually continues to have that purpose, even under different conditions. Even Russia's semblance of sovereignty, expression of sovereignty is a problem, right? And that's why NATO has actually been creeping and creeping further, because after shock therapy and after Russia was literally plunged into the dark ages economically, you had life expectancy drop by more than 10 years for the entire population. For men, it was nearly like 20 years. It was something incredibly devastating, right? Between 1991 to 99. And after that, Russia started to implement some reforms to sort of restabilize things under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, and that has been seen as a threat. Not to mention how things geopolitically have changed since the global war on terror, and how that has created this permanent crisis for the United States and opened up room for Russia to be more independent in terms of its foreign policy, to be able to make alliances with countries like China, to be able to assert itself in a way that is independent of the United States. That is what this is really all about. Ukraine is just a flashpoint for this. And so we have to remember that Ukraine is just a flashpoint for all of this. So to continue, the call between the two leaders comes hours after the U.S. moved some of its forces out of Ukraine and ordered the evacuation of most of its embassy staff on Saturday, as fears mount that a Russian invasion of the country could take place in the next few days. The moves are yet another sign that the U.S. fears Putin could order an invasion at any time, just one day after Biden's national security advisor warned Americans in Ukraine to leave, and that military action could begin with an aerial bombardment that would kill civilians, or that could kill civilians. So that's how the United States does things, right? This is similar to Syria, although there wasn't any embassy being emptied in Syria, but that's how the United States planned to begin a war with Syria. So this is very dangerous. That's in 2013, if you remember the red line by Obama. He was pressured to not take that step, but that's what was going to happen. A senior administration official told reporters Saturday afternoon that the call between the two presidents was professional and substantive, but there was no fundamental change in the dynamic that has been unfolding now for several weeks. The two presidents agreed that our teams will stay engaged in the days ahead, the official told reporters after the call. Russia may decide to proceed with military action anyway. Indeed, that is a distinct possibility. So I don't really want to go through any more of this. Actually, let's skip over to, that's the real escalation that happened today. Let's move on to all eyes on Ukraine. I'm curious about what CNN says because this is kind of the context and I can see if there's any corrections needed. So the U.S. has estimated that Russia has more than 100,000 troops near the Ukraine border. So 100,000 troops in Russia. Shocking. With thousands added this week, according to the administration official. It's always unnamed officials, right? Really intelligence. This is what they mean. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters on Friday that a Russian assault on Ukraine could begin soon, beginning with aerial bombings and missile attacks. He advised all Americans to leave, blah, blah, blah. We cannot predict the future. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Then why? This is so funny. But the risk is high enough and the threat is now immediate enough that this is what prudence demands. So, Mayor Vitaly, this is small for me. So, Klitschko outlined preparations the city is taking to safeguard critical and social infrastructure facilities in the event of a possible emergency. So obviously there's some. So Klitschko said our efforts aimed at preventing overcoming both possible provocations and withstanding military attacks. So obviously the United States has some friends in the Ukrainian government and the local government of Kiev. The senior administration official on Saturday said that the U.S. will continue and even increase its support for Ukraine. So there we go. There's the open market, baby. Will continue and even increase its support for Ukraine. So $2.7 billion isn't enough, right? It isn't enough. There's going to be more military aid sent to Ukraine. This is a big part of it. This is the military industrial complex. This is how war profiteering is done. And I believe that's a big pressure here. That's a big pressure point here. As to our plans going forward, I think President Biden and other officials have been clear that should Russia continue down the path of escalation, the U.S. will continue to increase our support for Ukraine to enable it to defend itself. And that approach has not changed. So that's what is happening. All right, I'm just going to end this screen share. That's what's happening. There isn't really that much substance there, guys. This is what's incredible about this. There isn't that much substance to any of these stories. And why is that? Because everything they're saying is a lie. It's a lie. It's literally a lie to lead us into war. Where have we heard lies before by the United States to lead us into war? Oh, I don't know. 2003, the invasion of Iraq, or 2002, I should say, weapons of mass destruction. They led to that vote, which Biden happily voted for at that time. Heard it before, weapons of mass destruction. We heard it before that, incubator babies, sanctions on children, right? It was worth it. That's what Madeleine Albright said. This is the same mentality. Same mentality. 500,000 Iraqi children dead because of U.S. sanctions was worth it. This is that mentality. This is all worth it because we're defending Ukraine. The United States is defending Ukraine. It's not defending Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't need the United States to defend it. Why? Well, the United States staged a coup in 2014, a really violent coup, one that empowered some of the most fascistic forces on the planet, right? When we were going to China, my wife is Jewish, Russian Jewish, but many generations down. So we were looking for flights to get to China. And of course, usually you have to stop somewhere if you're going to get a flight that is more affordable. So this was back in 2018. We were looking for this before our 2019 trip. And one of the landing spots was Kiev. I can tell you, we were not looking to go there because of what happened in 2014 and because of everything that happened afterward. right? Because the far right politics in Ukraine are just like Hungary, just like a lot of these Eastern European countries, Poland, right, that have far right governments. Why? Because the United States has wielded its influence to the degree after the fall of the Soviet Union to shape the politics of that region. So, to continue this policy of containing Russia, this new Cold War. That's why the politics of Ukraine are so divided, are so unstable. That's why the United States is calling the shots and not Ukraine. This is a huge problem. And not many people talk about this, right? This broader agenda. Why? Why? Well, the United States is trying to choke Russia. It's trying to strangle Russia militarily. It's trying to, I believe, do there's a big new Brzezinski model for the 21st century, which is try to admit every single Eastern European country, every single country bordering Russia into NATO and create such a massive potential threat that Russia feels the need to invest more militarily and potentially make a mistake to bring it into war, to collapse its society, and hopefully overthrow the government. That's the plan because the United States isn't all of this stuff. Oh, Russia's going to create a airstrike, all of this in Ukraine. It's nonsense. It's not going to happen. It's all intelligence lies. What the United States really wants is Russia to feel compelled to do that. So it has more opportunities to justify NATO admission for Ukraine and further sanctions on Russia to squeeze Russia and to try to overthrow the government there. And so, luckily, we do have more people. Unlike China, we do have more people who speak out about Russia. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who to me is so discredited at this point, but Tulsi Gabbard came out with a statement about it. There's a lot of people who will defend Russia, which is great, but it's not really in the movement, right? Not really in the movement. And that's because we do have this liberal hysteria. We do have social democratic hysteria. We do have even people who call themselves socialists who are anti Russian hysterics. They cannot seem to get this Cold War thing out of their head, and they believe that Russia is like the second coming of the Soviet Union, and that Putin is the second coming of the KGB, and that it's like the most oppressive and dictatorial place that there is on the planet, or one of them. It's a strong man, yada yada yada. So it doesn't deserve. They don't deserve support. Russia doesn't deserve support, and that's the situation. So that's where we're at in terms of Ukraine, and so the United States is looking to wage war there. And that doesn't mean that the United States is going to start dropping bombs tomorrow. What that means is that there is a geopolitical game plan here. There's a chess match going on, and the United States is trying to set fire to the board, meaning that it will literally do anything possible within the realm of possibility, which I don't even think dropping bombs on Ukraine, right? Or trying to provoke Russia into doing that as well is really the strategy here. I think the strategy here is creating a political situation through military provocations that will lead to more sanctions and that will lead to a more fertile political environment for further NATO encroachment. That is, I think, the strategy here. So, thank you so much for listening to this stream. I'm not going to go just yet. I'm staying on. Maybe I'll leave some time for questions. For those who are on Facebook, well, I don't know if this person is for real, but those on Facebook, please do go to the YouTube and like the stream. That's the best way to help boost the algorithm. Like the stream if you haven't already. I'm going to stick around probably for another 15, 20, maybe a half hour. Stories are done. I just want to approach these two things. May talk about some other things. We can maybe do some questions. Of course, like the stream, boosting the algorithm, subscribe to the channel while you are here. Also, subscribe to Patreon at patreon.com/DannyHaiphong to support me. So subscribe to my Patreon. That's the best way. Any amount you can. I'm really using this year. Luckily, I'm close. I have a lot of beautiful supporters. Thank you all so much. Thanks to everyone who's been supporting me up until this moment. Thanks for everyone who has been able to support me through difficult times, but had to leave. These are kind of the breaks of this economic moment and this crisis, and I appreciate all of you. I love all of you. You're all comrades. I know you're all comrades because if you're listening to me, you must be a comrade because people who aren't don't generally stick around. because they know who I am. They know my politics. They see me as, I don't know, some sort of threat or something like that. I don't know. It's ridiculous, but that's what it is. So, yeah, please do support if you can. Patreon's the best way. It's kind of like my version of super chats. You'll get one of these per month, more than one. I'm going to do an extreme Monday with Stephen Gowans, a comrade, a really interesting person who has taught me so much. And we're going to stream on Monday. That'll be fun. Talk about his COVID-19 analysis. He's coming out with a book on it, and how the killer's henchman, capitalism and COVID-19. So yeah, I've been doing a lot. It's been a busy, busy, busy month. I think I've had like 3 articles in like 5 to 7 days, something like that. It's been absolutely crazy for me in the writing sense. And I've been trying to, I was on Deprogram podcast, great podcast. I love them. They're so funny, but people, Hakeem Ugupnik, JT. So that will be coming out at the end of February. I'm going to be collaborating with Cyrus Jansen. Eventually, we're supposed to collaborate. We were supposed to collaborate today, but it got postponed probably to the beginning of March. So a lot of cool things coming, right? We're gonna try to have another Left Lens with Margaret on here. It's just been hard securing guests. People are busy. People are traveling. People are not reachable. Short month. I don't know, holidays, all that. So yeah, a lot of things going on. So please do support if you can at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. So what else is there, guys? What else is there? You have any questions? I'll be checking the chat. Let me check the bottom of the chat. I'm still here. I'm still here. So somebody asked, Dylan asked, here we go. This is a good one. Did you see Enes Kanter being the spokesperson of some new right-wing organization? They even had a commercial in the Olympics. Somebody mentioned the commercial. I did not see the commercial, but I do know he's speaking at the huge PAC organization. What is that called? Let me see. So Enes Kanter, what is it called? CNAC? It's the help me out, guys. Help me out, guys. So he is really, I know I shared this on Twitter, so let me look. He is, yeah, he's he's a GOP Republican. This guy, Enes Kanter, he's not no neolib, guys. He's not a neoliberal. He is all about the GOP section. I mean, that's posing with John Bolton, posing with, here we go, CPAC. There we go, the Conservative Political Action Committee, exactly. So he's going to speak for CPAC, right? Which is the huge. Hey, thank you, Dylan, for that as well. Enes Kanter is a GOP imperialist, right? So he's on the GOP side of things. Funny enough, claiming freedom, but that's the Mike Pompeo, right? He's like Mike Pompeo, but a basketball player. So I did see that. He's a joke. He is a laughingstock, right? He has absolutely no political influence in China. Yao Ming, I don't know if you saw that Yao Ming said, hey, come to China. And he had to say yes because Yao Ming is adored by the basketball community. So Enes Kanter has already isolated the basketball community globally, right? He's already isolated them through these attacks on China because China has 300 million basketball fans, all of which are consumers and have disposable income, have some income to spend. And so to insult China, right, 90% plus percent favorability rating of the Chinese, to attack the Chinese government, which has this high approval rating, you're attacking the basketball community, at least 90% of them, and therefore you are really hurting business, really hurting revenue, right? So he's isolated the basketball community through these attacks, and he claims he's going to go to China. I don't believe it for 1 second will he go to China. And if he does, he will do his best to misreport, misrepresent, and do everything he can to paint China as evil. But he won't be able to do that. At least he won't be able to do that publicly in China because he's known now. He's known. He's a household name. So if he tries to do that in China, I would love to see, just like how the German outlet DW and BBC was treated in China, he's going to get that treatment, and rightfully so. The public will come after him. They know who he is now. So I look forward to that. I'm trying to get to China before him, honestly. I want to go back to Xinjiang. I am missing China so much. I was only there for 2.5 weeks, and I want to go back. I want to explore more. I want to see more. I want Yeah, I want people to know the real China. That's why I'm doing all this fundraising, right? Trying to get a monthly income because it's so expensive to like live in New York City in these times, and to also won't have these plans to go back when you're not like backed by anybody. You don't have like donors or funders or people like that. So that's why I'm always saying patreon.com/Haiphong. I hate to say it over and over again, but that's what this is for. Because I'm trying to organize a Vietnam trip. I want to go on the Sino Lao Railway. I want to show you guys all of this from a US left, revolutionary leftist, anti-imperialist perspective. That's what I want to do. So that's my like 5-year plan. My wife and I have a 3-year plan, but for like all sorts of stuff, family stuff, her career stuff, my work, her political work, because she's also a communist. So so yeah, in the next couple of years, I want to do that. So let me see if there's any questions. La, 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 la. Okay, so back up here. So question: John McCarthy, can you talk about that amazing joint statement China Russia put out after the recent Xi Putin meeting? Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the statement that was put out, and there was one. I don't know if you're talking about the same one that was released right after right during the opening ceremony of the Olympics, talking about the international situation, talking about working jointly together to forward multipolarity. I think that's what you're talking about. But if you aren't, please correct me. Please send me a different statement. But I believe that's what you're talking about, right? Going forward on this future multipolarity cooperation. It was incredible, right? And it was really a compilation of all of the things that Russia and China had been saying for the last several years, but especially in the last couple of years, right? China and Russia are serious about countering color revolutions. They're serious about broadening cooperation. They're serious about being a pole of influence for a multipolar world, not for an imperialist world, not for a world that is dominated by one imperialist power. That is what Russia and China are explicitly saying. And it is incredible that, unlike what the corporate media is saying, it is actually incredible that Vladimir Putin was there at the Winter Olympics to support China. It is incredible that China is so vocal in the international arena around following international law, opposing sanctions, right? And now this joint cooperation around things like color revolutions is so, so, so important. I want this to be a top story. I want these things to be at the top of people's minds, right? That's why I talk about the new Cold War a lot. That's why I'm always talking about China, because we need to be talking about this. Why are we constantly talking about Joe Rogan and Dave Chappelle? I mean, I sometimes catch it with Dave Chappelle because I happen to have a lot of problems with the way that Dave Chappelle is sort of placed on this pedestal. All of these guys, they're placed on these pedestals, but we should be talking about this. We should be talking about these issues. If we're anti-imperialists, if we're revolutionaries, if we are for the movement, we should be talking about substantive problems. We should focus on this. And I'm not, look, censorship is a substantive problem. So yes, I am opposed to Spotify just removing people to a great degree, right? I am opposed to censorship from the US state in this very particular instance. But politically, we also have to be solid, and we also have to have political debate and discussion. We can't just say, oh, everything is false, everything is wrong. Our favorite podcaster, our favorite comedian, they're always correct. It's not the case. We have to be willing to say, no, it's not true, right? We're not hitching our wagon to Spotify. They're not movement activists. They're not on the left. But we also have to be very clear that there are more important things really to be there are more important struggles than censorship. Honestly, this new Cold War has a huge censorship element to it. No one ever talks about it. I held a whole panel with Jingjing Li, Lee Camp, Richard Medhurst, and we talked about the state-affiliated media smear, which is much more prominent and significant and has had far-reaching implications for the left than this Spotify controversy. That's just real talk. That's just facts. I don't see any big segments on that. I don't get calls about that. I don't get, hey, you want to talk about that? Not really. Some people, yeah. But Anyway, let's keep going with the questions. So let's see. All right. So I got probably another 15 minutes in me. There's a lot of questions here. Thank you guys. Thank you for being so enthusiastic. So I don't understand this question so much. It's you have BDS for Israel. Should you have a similar organization for the PLO since the PLO are just the internal IDF in the West Bank? That's a little bit too specific for me in terms of Palestinian resistance politics, but I will say that, yeah, I mean, I get the desire for there to be a more powerful anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist current in the United States. I get it. I have a lot of issues with the Palestinian solidarity movement politically in some cases, but I support it because I am 100% for Palestinian self-determination, 100% for BDS. But I understand that there are ideological limitations. I mean, I've been to protests where they're waving the East Turkestan flag, right, here in New York City, and that's just unconscionable. That's unjustifiable. So yeah, there are problems that we need to talk about, but that's all I'll say on that for now. Let's move on. Yeah, so this is an important point. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, yeah, it's not the PLO. The PA is the real puppet government of Israel, really, in the West Bank. So good correction there, Eric. So here's Yuri. I feel bad, Yuri. I'm so sorry. Things get crazy, and I've really not done a lot of interview shows. It's kind of a spur of the thing. So I owe you one, but you have a good question. Since History Month, any thoughts on the legacy of Bruce Dixon, Glenn Ford? Any thoughts on the legacy of Yuri Kochiyama? Wow. So legacy of Glenn Ford and Yuri Kochiyama and Bruce Dixon. All right, so let me try to be brief on this. Legacy of Glenn Ford. I mean, he was like a political father to me. So it still hurts that he's gone. So the legacy of him. I mean, I owe a lot of my ideological upbringing and coherence, at least, because I came to him already with like revolutionary fervor and a desire to study, study, study. But to be honest, it was him that really helped me coherently focus on my work in a way where I could center myself and be more accessible, be more effective. So for me, that's how his legacy, but overall, Glenn Ford's legacy, and I'm going to be doing a review of his book. I'm getting through it. Overall, his legacy is just one of a black radical fire, the black radical tradition, the communist tradition, the socialist tradition of the black liberation movement. All of that really flowed through all of his work, and he truly is someone that we just don't have so much anymore because of what happened to the black liberation movement, because of what has happened to politics, left politics in the United States as a whole, the repression, the misinformation, the manipulation, and also the opportunism of elements of the movement that has really brought the most left movement in the United States, the most revolutionary movement in the United States, to the point where we don't really see it. And he was really someone who was willing to, by any means necessary, keep that fire alive. And everything he did, from his organizing to all of his writing to his radio, all of it was all about keeping that alive for the next generation. And so we have to salute him for keeping what is the most prominent and important struggle and the most prominent and most revolutionary movement in the United States alive, the most internationalist movement alive, despite all of the reaction, despite the Obama period. I mean, we can go on and on and on. And Bruce Dixon, very, very similar in my opinion. Although we had some disagreements, Bruce Dixon was someone who was very helpful to me during the Black Lives Matter first iteration of it, 2014. Really, Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon helped guide me through that moment because I was younger. I was a little bit more loose, right? A little bit more of a loose cannon. And I was getting myself into situations, big disagreements, big debates that were very hostile, that have since kind of bore fruit in the sense that a lot of these more mainstream Black Lives Matter folks have been outed, exposed through their financial dealings and the way that they've been co-opted by the Democratic Party. But at that time, it wasn't so clear, and we were making it more clear. We were the ones who started and generated that conversation. Bruce Dixon and Glenn Ford were in the lead of that, and I was also kind of going along with it because I thought it was strategically correct at that time to do so because nobody else was. And I knew the consequences for the activists on the ground, knowing some of them, but also just knowing objectively what was going on. So I was getting into really hard situations where I was being baited, race baited, there was all sorts of things that were happening, and they guided me through it and supported me. And so Bruce Dixon, that's his legacy for me personally. And then politically, I mean, he was an organizer through and through, someone that I learned so much from in terms of organizing, politically solid, right? Solid anti-imperialist, solid socialist, and organizing. Just there are a few organizers like Bruce Dixon, right, with all of that experience in the Black Panther Party, Illinois days, union movement, and then, of course, within the political apparatus, where he eventually became a Green and pushed third parties, there are a few people who did the work like he did it. So salute to Bruce Dixon. And then Yuri Kochiyama, hero of mine, Japanese American activist. Her parents were victims of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. She experienced that, learned from it, and was a big and a good friend of Malcolm X. And she was a revolutionary. There's an amazing mural in Harlem where I used to work of her, and she was an anti-imperialist through and through, and someone I seek to emulate in terms of their capacity to have solidarity based on a common struggle against white supremacy, empire, and capitalist exploitation. That's what she was about. And that's why she was able to develop such a solid relationship. Was there when Malcolm X was assassinated, was like holding his head, I believe. I mean, she was deeply involved. She was getting ready to help him with his organization for Afro-American unity. I mean, this stuff gets me emotional because it's so beautiful, and it's something that I try to emulate in my work every single day because it reflects my experience, right? I'm not, people like to say, look at me and they're like, oh, you're white. Oh, you're this, you're Asian. Why you comment on that? Why you write for Black and Gender Report? Well, I grew up in a community of working class people, many of whom happen to be Black. I also grew up in a community of just working class people in general. And I learned very early that solidarity is critical, even if it isn't political in character. And then being able to step into revolutionary politics, being able to have that privilege, really, right? That honor, something that I take very seriously. You have to employ that. You have to understand it. And people like Yuri Kochiyama help us understand what solidarity looks like. So let's go on to the questions at hand. Okay. So Dylan, again, I'll entertain you here because I love talking about this. I'd love to visit China too. What's your favorite part of China that you've been to? That's impossible, but honestly, ironically, it was Xi'an. So Xi'an was the topic of the lockdown, right? The lockdown in Xi'an was so horrible, right? And bad things did happen. There were errors because it happened so swiftly. And in China, local governance happens to be less effective than the central government, and there are many reasons for this. The anti-corruption campaign happens to be really focused on local politics and local governance because that's where things during the reform and opening up period, but really just in general, right? That's where things kind of get to be a little more dicey in terms of implementing and applying things at the local level. And so there's a reputation. Local government is just not as effective as the central government. And so Xi'an, there are mistakes made during the lockdown, but overall, despite, yes, there was a woman who unfortunately lost her child, that was swiftly changed. I mean, swiftly responded to. There was massive just corrections of like food shortages, all of that happened, but it was corrected swiftly, right? In terms of a national policy where these lockdown measures were then crafted so that people, yes, local authorities should not be so heavy-handed that they don't allow people to come into the hospital if they really do need it, and that even if they don't have the correct test or whatever, there are certain situations where you have to let that happen, and they corrected it. I don't want to get caught up in that because the question is my favorite part about China was Xi'an. Xi'an is so incredibly diverse for a city that's central China, for a city that is so modern. I love the Urumqi too, but Urumqi had a different kind of flavor, and it was so cold at that time, it was hard to enjoy. So earlier in the trip, we were in Xi'an, and the weather was better in central China than it was in western China. And to be able to eat at the halal places, to be able to go and speak to Chinese Muslims who were there, various ethnic groups. It's a very diverse city with a huge Muslim population as well, or Islam practicing population as well. And it was beautiful, so modern. The public transit was just so smooth. The food was so incredible. I mean, the meat there was just like to die for. I mean, and just the vibe, the feel, it was really a joy to be in Xi'an. And so I do miss it a lot, not just Xi'an, but the whole trip, because I always say this, it was right before the pandemic. It was such a critical moment for me right before the pandemic where I go there and I see how effective China's socialism with Chinese characteristics really is, to see a proud and confident people who share a common struggle with me, to be someone of Southeast Asian descent, Vietnamese, Chinese descent, to be able to go there and see that level of success, to see a proud Asian people practicing socialism and so confident, and to have gained so much from their struggle was just a beautiful thing. And so that the high speed rail system that I was able to travel on twice. I did do a lot of the tourist things in Beijing, which was fine, but I really did like just being in the city, being able to walk around, be able to do my own thing, and just to see those gains and to see a modern city, modern cities, so clean. It reminded me what W.E.B. Du Bois said on his trip to China in the 50s. He wrote about it in his autobiography, and he talked about how clean China was, and he analyzed it as being, well, in China, it's a socialist system, and people really do respect their society because they see ownership over it collectively, and that's just the vibe I felt when I was there, and it was just incredible. Not to mention all the modernization, the high tech, the infrastructure, and the subsidization. Food was cheap, medicine was cheap. We went to a traditional Chinese medicine hospital, and one of our friends, comrades, went there for a stomach issue, and just to have that experience, to see what it was like, how cheap it was. Transportation was so cheap, smooth. Train came every 2 minutes. I mean, things that I could talk on and on about, but I won't. So that's my favorite parts in summary. And let's keep going. We're reaching the hour and a half point. Let's see. Any other questions? Sorry if I skip some. Sometimes I anyone able to see. I'm not going to get into like other podcasters, YouTubers. I'm really trying to keep my work positive. There's a lot of confusion right now. There's a lot of disagreements. I'm really not trying to get into all of that. The crosstalk between podcasters and all that. That's just not me. It puts a lot of stress. My journalism, my analysis, my writing, I got to keep focused because I just don't see a lot of these issues as being really central. But we are going to talk a lot about COVID-19 on Monday, but from a perspective that I think is just more coherent. We're not talking about like, you know, all of this like banter. We're going to talk about the system analysis, capitalism, socialism, that kind of thing. We're not going to get into things that will take me down on YouTube. People have messaged me about these things, and sometimes I answer, sometimes I don't. You can if you want, but I'm not going to get into that here, especially given all that's been happening. So, okay. So, I did summarize this. What, Nani? That's an anime reference. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you can see Vegeta right there. What, Nani? But I'm a big anime fan. or I have been since I was like 11. At least Super, Dragon Ball Z, all that stuff, but not everything. But anyway, Nani, I would say please do. I'm not gonna answer this question now. Please do go back in the stream. You can see it from the beginning, and that question is answered. So thanks for the question. Thank you, defund the oligarchy. If this is true, okay, I did the Patreon, matey. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. For those who can't support the program, that's the best way to do it. Support my articles, everything. You're supporting all of my work through that. I don't do super chats here. So, any plans to go back on Jimmy Dore soon? I would love to go back on the Jimmy Dore show. I don't. I see that a lot of things that Jimmy Dore is focusing on, I tend not to be focusing on right now, but I would love to talk about anything, right? I'm willing to do that, but no, not really, not at the moment. Not, usually it's like on an ask basis, but I haven't really had any stories or things that I feel like have fit because I feel like the focus is on COVID-19 and all of that, and I focus on that to a degree, but it's a different focus. I focus on zero COVID, China's response. I focus on that sort of thing, public, more from the perspective of like what I've been talking about for the last 2 years. How the hell should we, and do we get out of this? And I find that that's just not the conversation anymore for so many reasons. But I would like to, at some point be back on that show. That'd be great. So please post shareable topic-based clips from this live stream. Thank you so much, John. I will definitely consider that. Yeah, I will definitely chop this up. I've been trying to do that more so, is to chop streams up. So I'll try to do that. But we're running towards the end. I'm not going to stay on too much longer. Um, let's see. Let's see. So how are you going to get out the truth if you take away free speech in the press? How are you going to organize or even get the truth out? So, okay. So in my book on American exceptionalism, I talk about how there really hasn't been a free speech in the United States. And this doesn't mean that I don't support and I don't defend people from censorship or anything like that. I mean, I have talked about this. I'm a big supporter of Julian Assange, and I oppose everything that's happened to him. I was talking about this before. It was really cool, COINTELPRO, into how it relates to how it led into the war on the left from 20th century really bled into universalizing that during the global war on terror. That's what happened. So I've talked about that in the past, and certainly I'm opposed to state repression and the ever encroaching, and this includes now through private corporations doing this as well in conjunction with the state. I'm opposed to all of that. But I would say that we also have to be just real about this, that this is something that requires us to organize independently, right? And to organize together and cooperate more and to be more in solidarity with each other, especially even in the independent media sphere. I don't see that so much. I see that there's a lot of fighting about certain things like, oh, do you support that? Do you support this? Oh, are you going to comment on what that podcaster said? Or, oh, what's your take on COVID? And if you don't have the take I have, then, we are not able to work together, all of this stuff. It's just, I mean, that's what I think we need to take care of first. We need to take care of us internally because honestly, we can't have a unified movement if we're just more concerned about who's right now, right? That's why I tend to focus on issues that I think are just more pertinent from a socialist perspective because I feel like there is this real kind of witch hunt mentality. I don't know what it is. I've seen it. I've experienced it through messages and stuff that I receive, and I'm just not into that. So I'm here doing work, and I think that we need to, the way that we build class unity, working class unity, is not by cross posting and cross talking about each other, but by reaching out with concrete activities, with concrete suggestions, and working through our disagreements. But no, I don't believe that taking away free speech is what is making it harder for us to organize. I believe state repression is making it harder for us to organize, but I also believe it's the fact that there isn't a whole plethora of factors available right now that makes a mass movement possible. It's not just, oh, the state repression. Actually, in many cases, like in the 60s and 70s, even during the Third International period, state repression actually helped organize people. But there's a reason why state repression isn't doing that right now, right? State repression gets people angry, gets people unified. And I think that's because there has been this concerted ideological campaign, this anti-communism, this uh, neoliberalism, all of this together, the neoconservative mentality that is still festering inside of the movement, and we need to take care of that as well. And that is how we can organize a more powerful movement so that these things like censorship can't just destroy us because we are no longer individuals, but we are collective, we are organized, and we have the capacity not just to get the message out, but to do the work because this is just part of the work. Getting the message out, political education, that's part of it. Super important part. Happens to be why I'm a part of that. But there's also a lot of other things that need to be done that cannot be done if the way that we talk, like people like me talk, is all about just, I don't know, chasing my own clout, chasing my own ass. I just don't do that shit. Like, I'm sorry. I'm a mature human being who has been a part of struggles at a grassroots level and has tested my socialist, Marxist, Leninist perspective in practice. And I just know that's just not how you go about things. That's not how ordinary people are. That's not how working class people are. That's not how oppressed people are won over. So that's where I'm at. So thanks for that question, though. Did everyone hear? Yeah, so this is a good one. Did everyone hear the U.S. is going to release 3.5 billion of the 7.5 billion of Afghan money back to Afghanistan? They're going to steal the other half and give it back to 9/11 families because dot dot dot. So good point, Matthew. But that other 3.5 billion necessarily isn't going to Afghanistan. It's going in the form of humanitarian aid and relief. And so I also wrote about this in my book, but I also talk about this a lot in terms of NGOs and their soft power role. And that's really where it's going to go. It's not going to be really humanitarian relief. It's going to be soft power imperialism. And I don't think it's going to be going to the people of Afghanistan. That's really a public relations move because of all the pressure and condemnation that even the mainstream media has given the Biden administration for the conditions of the Afghan people after the withdrawal. And so that is just public relations that has no bearing on the conditions of the Afghan people. It's just to make the Biden administration look a little better. But all 7 billion has been plundered, and it really isn't going back to the people of Afghanistan. This is a political move. This is a way to assert dominance. It reminds me of what the UK did in conjunction with the United States to Venezuela, stealing all of that gold a few years ago. This is the same thing. So thanks for that question, or point, I should say. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else? La, la, la. Thank you so much for coming on, though. This is a great stream, well attended. Please do like the stream. Please do consider supporting me at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. If you can't support me monthly there, you can support me annually on Substack. That's also in the description. You can also just subscribe to that for free. But please do patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. Be great. And like the stream, help boost it in the algorithm. That would be great. Okay, I don't see any more. Well, here we go. My brain is easily brainwashed by US. Do you believe? Okay, so do you believe that a kind of lifelong quarantine from neoliberals and mainstream media is necessary for revolutionary thinking? Not really. Revolutionary thinking? Not really. Creative experiments? This is a good point, though, because I think it speaks to a collective feeling that I think a lot of us have, right? Like what is going to generate? I kind of alluded to it. It's not just that the repression is so stifling right now. It's not just that the propaganda is so stifling. It's that there aren't a set of conditions based on both that and the balance of forces on our side, right? Because we do have some agency. We're not just peons of the oligarchy. That's a real pessimistic view. But on our side, there are a lot of factors that aren't really working out as well. The pandemic being one of them, the economic crisis being one of them. I mean, there are a lot of things that make it hard. The austerity, the desperation. I think at a policy level, that has a lot to do with it as well, and it can explain why neoliberal thinking, neoconservative thinking, even libertarian thinking, which I see creeping up in left wing circles, is happening right now. And so, no, I don't think a lifelong quarantine. I do think after the revolution, we're going to have to do some things about that kind of information, re educate, also prevent it from cropping up, at least in the sense of having any real political power. So we will not have neoliberal media. We won't have that. We won't have private media that is able to exploit people for profit and manipulate them into serving their own or serving the interests of the former ruling class. We won't have that after the revolution. I'm very, 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 very adamant about that. So no, I don't think any quarantine is needed. I think we need to continue doing the work. The objective conditions will continue to play out, and we need to be doing more of the work that we are doing already and winning more people over to do that work with us as well on the concrete level, political education, grassroots movement, political organizing, all of that. That is what needs to be done in order for us to get out of this. We can't really quarantine ourselves. It's an interesting way of framing it from it right now. But surely, if you are going to harness at the individual level or even at the movement level, if you're going to harness ideological cohesion and coherence in a movement, yeah, you're going to have to do some ignoring of the mainstream media. You're going to have to cut some of that out, at least in the sense that we just don't have the time to be reading all that stuff. Luckily, we have revolutionaries, radicals, leftists, people who do talk about the stories that are happening. So we don't necessarily need to have it filtered through the corporate media so much. So let me see if there's anything else. Actually, let me get rid of that. Thank you so much, Creative Experiments. So I'm looking more. I hope I'm sounding a little more clear in this stream. I had some criticism about the ums and the uhs, and so I'm trying to keep that out because it's generally not how I speak. But streaming, I'm trying to be more chill, and so there is some more of that. But I'm trying to be more solid. So I don't. Let's see. Um. Let's see. I don't see any more question marks. Maybe you're asking questions. I'm just skipping them because Patreon Substack game. Thank you so much. Cinema, good comrade. Appreciate it. Yes. Do support if you're able. Support this show. It supports my articles. Thank you so much for putting that out there. Got Stephen Gowans coming up, a real someone who I really respect, coming on Monday. Warning, if you join us Monday, and please do, the event is already up, so you can wait for that. If you're going to be there, it's going to be at noon Eastern time, so sorry for the earliness. I do have a dog now. We really tired him out, so he's like sleeping like sleeping like an angel right now. But it's gonna be cold that day. It's gonna be tough. His energy might be higher, and I might be getting a delivery, and that always sets him off. So I may have to actually pause the stream at some point, even with Steven there. And that might happen, but it'll only take a couple minutes because I do have distractions. I can distract him much better than I did when I first got him. But anyway, so I don't see any more. Here we go. Do you think the conversation about truckers protesting COVID policy is divisive? I do. I'm not going to get into it too much because honestly, I've been following it. There are people who are trying to get me to follow. I appreciate that. I have a subscriber on Patreon who's been messaging me stuff, and I've been going back and forth with them a little bit. But I do think it's divisive in the sense that, I want to hear what the Canadian left has to say, what communists. I have been seeing what people who I respect, like Q and Communist Party of Canada, what they've been saying, and they're closer to it. They know people on the ground, So look, I don't have enough. I'm just not following it really. I do worry that it is another Tea Party moment. I'm not going to say that I know 100% for sure that who the donors are. I do know that the Great Barrington Declaration, for example, is funded by sponsored by a Koch funded foundation, the American Institute for Economic Policy. I do know that. And I do know that a lot of this like anti-lockdown stuff does have roots in that as well, and we can't deny it. So I'm certainly open to discussing that more and debating that more. But I do think it's divisive in the sense that even if we disagree on this, and we should be uniting on issues that we agree upon and not be getting into, oh, you're anti working class, oh, you're pro big pharma, or oh, the opposite, you're all just COVID crazies or whatever, denialists. I think we gotta agree right now. The biggest reason why COVID-19 is so difficult to understand and to come together around is because the US government literally neglected the entire population to die from COVID-19. Well, I'm not gonna say the entire population because the 1% was protected by their wealth, their ability to protect themselves, but the rest of the population was left to die, and that's what's happened, almost a million deaths. So that's the biggest problem, and that's the thing that I want to talk about more, and I think we can all agree on that. And now it's about how do we get out of this thing? How do we protect people who are vulnerable? How do we support healthcare workers? How do we also ensure that this isn't politicized for geopolitical ends, which it has been since the beginning? So that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the policies that will literally create a situation that is actually safe and not just this free laissez-faire, let's all go back to normal 2019. That's just not the world. And COVID-19 is a real thing. It's not fake. Omicron, although it's less virulent and maybe a little less severe, people are still dying from it. And I care about older people. I care about disabled people. I care about the people who are dying from it. And I also care about people who die from other things, who people say, oh, well, what about the people who are dying from heart attacks and all that stuff? I care about them too. And I think that the US is a wholly unhealthy society and capitalism is destroying us. And people who die from things like that when they shouldn't, we need to help them as well. So that's my position, guys. This is not an attack on anybody. If you disagree with me, I still want to work with you on other things. I'm not trying to be here to be like, oh, let's cancel you over COVID. Man, there's just so much going on. And I'm an internationalist. I'm a communist. I'm a revolutionary. I'm trying to focus on that. And I don't think that this issue is really organizing people for the revolution. I don't see it, guys. So thanks for the question. So people are leaving. All right. I see some people leaving. All right. I don't see any other. Oh, also, I hope that this. I know that some people have actually left my Patreon and other things because of my positions on COVID, or even just me liking a tweet. I, Come on, man. Like, if you support the work that I do, that's. I mean, I don't understand what that's all about. To me, that's just not. That just shows the ultimate divisiveness of all of this. Like, you shouldn't be trying to bankrupt the, actual independent left journalists just because they disagree with you on one thing. I think that that's just a lot. I had the same thing happen with the patriotic socialism thing, and I felt that to be just I mean, if you disagree, you disagree, but it's like you're literally I mean, you can do what you want with your money, of course. This is not about that, but I'm talking about the principle of it. I just find it an interesting activity to say, all right, this person disagrees with me on one thing and they're not worth supporting. I just find that strange. Um, so Yuri says, what kind of dog? It's a mix. He is, I don't know. He's some sort of collie breed, probably pit as well, and some other things, I think. Um, so thanks for asking. So I don't think I have anything else. My jaw is actually hurting. I don't usually talk this much. Usually at my computer typing away. So yeah, support the show. Here we go. You were spreading smears about the Barrington Doors just like Fauci Collins did. Are they fringe, Danny? I mean, I don't think I mean they're not fringe anymore since they got a lot of influence. A lot of people are agreeing with them. But I'm not spearing the I mean, literally the Great Barrington Declaration is sponsored by the American Institute for Economic Policy, which is a think tank backed by fossil fuel interests and Charles Koch himself, like the Koch brothers themselves. So I don't understand where this smear is coming from. These are just the facts. You can do what you want with them. For me, they indicate that the politics behind the Great Barrington Declaration may not be so 100% genuine for leftists to jump on. But hey, If you disagree, I would love to see your sources on it. I would love to see what you feel like is the truth. I've had people send me sources and literally will send me something that's like from the same source and connected to this thing as well. So like I don't please, I'm willing to engage, but I'm not smearing anyone. That's just the truth of the matter. That's just it. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's sponsored. It's literally you go to Google it. I mean, it literally says, I'll pull it up if you want, but I don't really want to get into it to that degree. You can just look it up and it says the AIEP sponsors the Great Barrington Declaration. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. That's not fringe. That's actually pretty institutionally powerful because that's a very influential think tank, something like that. I don't know. Koch brothers, not fringe. So thanks so much, Dylan, on COVID. Appreciate that. Really do. COVID is tough. So look, I'm trying to stay focused, man. All right, Makito Swarm doesn't support liars. That's great. So yeah, this is a concern of mine too about Tucker Carlson. Look, Tucker Carlson, I don't know his intentions for bringing on the anti-war left journalists, and I'm not gonna not look. Do I think that it's 100% genuine? No, I don't think so. Is it helpful for anti-war journalists to go on there? In the I guess in the concrete sense, yeah, sure. Helpful to a degree. Now, is there dangers to it? Of course there are. And so we should be talking about all of these things. Usually the latter, the last thing I just said, not talked about in terms of what are the dangers of Tucker Carlson's politics. I do. I talk about it. I'm not going to be invited on Tucker Carlson because I'm the CCP guy, right? That's what people think of me from his perspective, probably. I don't think I'm going to get invited. Surely, if someone would want to help me do that, I'm not going to beg or ask or do any of that. That's not who I am. But if someone wanted to help me do that, I would go on. But I would be very honest and I wouldn't, silo anything. But I would talk about China if you wanted me to talk about China and we can get into it. He said, I think, one decent story about China, but in terms of their education policy, I think. But other than that, he's a China hawk. Very anti-communist in that sense, racist in so many ways. I mean, people cannot deny that. Listen to his coverage on China. It's racist. Listen to his coverage on anything that has to do with black people, with undocumented people. It's racist. I mean, I'm not trying to this is not being some sort of neo-lib, shit-lib, whatever. No, that's just the truth. And it's not bad to say that because it's dangerous. It's dangerous that he can curry favor. Yeah, it is dangerous. Should we still accept the invitation? Yeah, probably. I mean, if others are going to do it and we're able to get our message out, sure, but we cannot be so naive in a collective sense, in a movement sense, that somehow it doesn't have both good and bad consequences to it. Everything does, right? Everything has positive and negative consequences. Nothing is purely one side or the other. And so here, yeah, there are positive qualities getting our message out. Um, oh, sorry, it was AIER. Thanks, Makito. I know you're very angry at me. It says they did not receive any money from from the Kochs, but yet that foundation sponsored them. So sure. Okay. So anyway, that should be the stream. We're running on 2 hours. I have to eat dinner badly. I'm hungry as hell. Then I gotta take my boy out. But look, I am, I'm not going to get down the COVID rabbit hole. I appreciate the questions and I'm always willing to answer them. But yeah, the American Institute for Economic, I believe it's economic research. They sponsor the Great Barrington Declaration. And if you think that's a smear, okay. But I do think that if they're sponsored by them, they have a lot of influence over it. And thus, I cannot 100% get on board with it, nor am I of agreement. And I'll just say this. I am not of the agreement that we should just go back to normal. I do think COVID-19 still does kill people. And I do think that this is a global pandemic and this is about a lot more than just us. And so we need to think beyond the US's borders and we need to think about the entire public health gamut, the entire policy gambit. We need to think about all of it, right? And surely I'll come out, I'll say it. Yeah, no, I am not like pro mandate, pro vaccine mandate, pro lockdown. No, 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 no. I think we have to think about this comprehensively, right? I am not anti vaccine. I took the vaccine. I believe the vaccine should be a part of a COVID-19 response, but it shouldn't be the only thing that's part of a COVID-19 response. Am I anti lockdown? I'm anti what the United States did, which is inconsistent lockdowns that did have financial consequences and did, uh, make it hard, make people's lives harder. But that's because there wasn't a lot of institutional support. I fundamentally think that quarantine is an effective policy. And it was effective in China. It was effective in Cuba. It was effective in so many places, even Venezuela. We can go across the board around the world. Quarantine is an effective policy to mitigate spread of COVID-19. And so it should be a part of our overall public health approach. But we should be supporting people economically through that and we should be ensuring that their lives aren't ruined by that, right? If we had done that from the beginning, if the United States had done that from the beginning, if they had done that in January and February and began to take active measures then when the virus was spreading and everyone knew it, but then we would be in much better shape right now. And that's my take on it. Um, so yeah, and and there's so many components to this. So this is a whole podcast, this is a whole thing. But this is my position really, Zevin. We should be looking to China how they handled COVID. Yeah. Put your damn American exceptionalist, racist arrogance in the fucking trash and learn from 1.4 billion people who have literally contained COVID-19. That has been my position since the very beginning. I was on Jimmy Dore's show. I was on a lot of programs early on, and I said, look at China, look at Venezuela, even. They're supporting people through the pandemic. Why can't we? Back then, we were talking more about that. Now, we're not talking so much about that because I think that has gone out the window. I don't think people have hope for that. I still believe in that. I'm a socialist. I'm not anything else. That's what I believe in. Why don't you talk about that? Huh? Let's do that. Let's have that conversation. Thanks. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. All right. So someone says zero COVID is literally impossible. That's not what zero COVID is, though. It's not about eliminating the virus in one place. It's about the measures that are needed to curb the spread to the maximum amount possible, which is possible, aka China did it, Cuba did it, to the point where you can not only reopen, most people in China are living normal lives right now. I know because I have several friends, several people in China, both foreigners who live in China, Americans, Canadians, and I have several Chinese friends. They're telling me, they tell me every day, they show me, I know it. I mean, it's this, all this stuff like China covers it up. Blah, blah. No, they don't. I can 100% verify. That's 100% verified through people's experiences. And you have to be racist to believe otherwise, because that means you just think every Chinese person is like some sort of automaton and doesn't know what they're saying. So yeah. Anyway, that so this person wants to say, what is the meaning of zero then? So zero is the approach. It's the quote unquote, it's the end goal, right? We're trying to get rid of COVID-19. That was you try to get rid of pandemics, right? You do try. That is what the goal is. But in the immediate sense, the policies are not a prescription to get rid of them, to get rid of it in one place. It is to lay the basis for the entire world to be able to get rid of a pandemic, which is not necessarily impossible. That is not known. But we can't even get to know whether that's possible or not because the world isn't coordinating about it. And the United States has been the biggest impediment to that. So we can't really know whether the pandemic can be mitigated to the point where it is no longer a thing. Likely now that's not the case because the US and Europe are doing herd immunity and it'll just become endemic. And yeah, no, it won't go away. And so, it won't be a thing of the past or whatever, like prior pandemics. So, anyway, so my dog is literally snoring right now. So anyway, that's it. I don't want to get, 2 hours in. This was great. I really appreciate all the engagement. Um, Please do like the stream. You're all still here. That's amazing. And like the stream. And please do support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Danny Haiphong. You can subscribe to my Substack as well as a different option. And I hope to see you on Monday. I would love to see this enthusiasm on Monday. I know Monday at noon is tough, but if it's not even possible, just make sure you go back, watch it, like it, do all that, boost in the algorithm after the fact, because Stephen Gowan is an incredible analyst, incredible journalist, revolutionary, and yeah. So much more to come from me. I actually got an article on Dave Zirin in his response to the Winter Olympics, which I found to be unfortunately troubling. And so that article will be coming out probably in the next day or two. And more to come from me, guys. I've actually been doing quite well. I appreciate all your support. Thank you for everything. Please do subscribe if you can. Please do like, anything you can to support me. I really appreciate it. I love you all. Much solidarity. I will be back again at some point. I like doing these individual things at these hours. My wife is out right now, so I had a little bit more of the room to do this. Generally don't. I'm generally, I live in a small New York City apartment, so I'm generally trying to like live life as well. But had some time today. Hopefully, we can do this more as time allows. But yeah, salute. Take care, and see you next time. Peace out.